So I'm mulling something over. I've been mulling it over for the last few days. Many people don't realize this, but I was invited to be the Pittsburgh Magazine's Pittsburgher of the Year. It's the second time in a row. Last year I turned it down. This year I'm mulling it over. We'll see how it goes. A few other people on Facebook reached out to me and said they too were invited for this great honor, Pittsburgh Magazine Pittsburgher of the Year. Let's be honest, small potatoes. Only big shots like me, Brian Crawford, get such an honor, such prestige. So I'm mulling it over. We'll see what happens. I posted it on Twitter. I leaked the information. And we have people that are responding. People are liking it. People agree with it. So do you think I should accept the honor? Or I don't know. They want to come into studio. They want to take pictures. They want to do a lengthy interview with me. And I run this big company, 2 radio stations. I have this show. I'm in demand. People are... Just the other day, somebody asked me for a letter of recommendation. And because I'm such a nice guy, I went through and I did it despite my busy schedule. But I'm always a giver. So do I really want to indulge in something like a lengthy interview here at the studio where I'm being interviewed? I don't know. It's just everyone who knows me knows that I never talk about myself. I never self-promote. It's just not my style. So I'm mulling it over. Give me your thoughts. You can let me know if I should take this honor. And if you've been approached by the Pittsburgh Magazine, please let me know on Facebook. You can message us on the live chat, the Facebook live chat, or you can hit me up on Twitter at RiverTalkPGH. This is the River's Edge Radio Network. I am Brian Crawford, Pittsburgh's moral compass, your voice of reason among 3 rivers of chaos, here in Mr. Small's Theater. You're listening to the River's Edge Radio Network, Pittsburgh's voice for local music at riversedgepgh.com. And don't forget, if you're on the run, if you're on the road and you want to listen to local music all day, every day, you can download the TuneIn Radio app and find us as well as our sister station, The Metal Edge, right on that app. It's a really cool thing because you can listen to radio stations all over the world. But really, why would you want to? You've got the 2 best right here in Pittsburgh. I've got Erick Williams. He's going to be joining me throughout the show, and then we're going to be bringing in Aaron Watson as well from the podcast Going Deep with Aaron Watson. He is here. Erick is a familiar face. Well, you've both been on the program before, but Erick, you used to be somewhat of a co-host for a while on River Talk, so it's good to bring you back. Michael Cohen was supposed to be here.
I was wondering about that.
He's such a fan of the Christmas season in shopping. He's a big shopaholic, but many people don't realize that. So he is out.
I'm giving you a skeptical face.
He's gallivanting around the city of Pittsburgh. He's at the malls. He's shopping. He's on a mission to save Century 3 Mall. He's there right now shopping in all of the long lines, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We've got a lot of good stuff on the program. Aaron is going to be talking to us about his summit that is coming up, the Going Deep Summit. Aaron, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited.
You're excited. It's going to be a good show. We've got lots going on. We've got some news on Irwin Park. We've got some interesting news dealing with Star Wars, which is a great article I found out about through our friend Michael Sorg with the Awesome Cast show, which you can hear Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. at riversedgepgh.com. We have the weird news, and then we are going to talk about the Going Deep Summit, so lots of really, really good stuff. And we're going to talk with Aaron, too, about the shape of the Earth. There is a man who is disputing that, and we'll get into that story a little bit. I'm sure you've heard of it, but we're going to get Aaron's take, because Aaron has actually traveled the Earth, so he's got an interesting...
Most of it, not all of it.
Most of it. So we'll get into that, because that's an interesting comment right there, and that's something I want to dive into a little bit more as the show goes on. But yeah, big shots like me, like Donald Trump, he was recently... according to him, he said that Time Magazine said that he probably was in the running for Person of the Year with Time Magazine, and I, like the president, was offered for Pittsburgh Magazine. Do you guys think I should be Pittsburgh Magazine's Pittsburgher of the Year? I mean, I feel like I've earned it. I feel like I deserve it. You know, I built a huge music festival, my committee and I, the Millville Music Festival. We launched a second radio station in Pittsburgh. My voice soothes the thousands of people that listen to this program every day. I mean, who knows where this city would be? And as Pittsburgh's moral compass, I keep the city on the right track, on the right path, and this entire city could descend into moral decay, descend into the Monongahela, descend into, I don't know, an abandoned coal mine if it wasn't for my values propping up the entire city.
Let's not forget that you also protect us single-handedly every week from the Mon Monster.
And we'll get to that with our 3 weird stories. It's a horrible, horrible beast that has been attacking the city for years. You know, we used to have all these big floods in the city. There was one time when Millville flooded in the 2000s. Everyone thinks that stuff, well, there was the one time recently. Yeah, Millville's flooded several times. But everyone thinks that kind of stuff, that's coincidence. Notice how nothing like that has transpired since I moved to the city limits. Just keep that in the back of your mind. So you had a comment.
I was going to say, if not you, then...
Then who? Exactly. Maybe you, Aaron. You've got a big summit coming up.
Give it a year or two.
Give it a year or two, yeah. So they've been begging me for years to get in on this, and I don't know. Like I said, I don't like to self-indulge at all. So, well, no, I'm not a self-indulger. only the most humble of people make it onto the river's edge net waves. So 2 descendants of Irwin's founder, and I always find it interesting when I hear stories coming from Irwin. I grew up in North Irwin, where I was a councilman, because again, I'm always giving. So I was a councilman in North Irwin, and really North Irwin is like the size of this studio. It's a really small town. So you went to Irwin for everything, Irwin or North Huntington, and this story I thought was kind of interesting. There's this beautiful park, this huge, beautiful park in Irwin called Irwin Park, and 2 descendants are upset with a plan to add a ramp into downtown Irwin. The reason why they are upset is the ramp is supposed to split through Irwin Park, and I thought that was interesting. I think that would be a huge shame. There are already exits coming off of Route 30 that take you down into Main Street. I don't know if they really even need another exit. If they do, I don't like the idea of putting it through the park, because I feel like so many towns have these small little dinky parks. And I feel like a park is so valuable. We talked recently about the Hayes Woods Park and the disaster that's turning into, where it was supposed to be the largest, and now it's not going to be the largest because they're taking parts of it away for housing development. And I feel like Irwin has this big, beautiful park, and there's so many different facets to it. We already lost part of it due to disrepair. There was a beautiful part of Irwin Park. It was called Little Knight's Kingdom. And have you guys seen those wooden playgrounds with the zip lines and all sorts of crazy stuff? Irwin was kind of a pioneer in that. They built one of the first ones in the area, Little Knight's Kingdom. It was all built by volunteers, but the upkeep was not planned. So it kind of started falling apart. And it's a tragic situation where this park is now, they literally have big signs that forbid people from going up into Little Knight's Kingdom, and that's what made that park, well, there were a lot of things that made that park really cool, but that was one of them. They have a big amphitheater there where they have shows, movies in the park. It's a beautiful amphitheater, and putting a ramp from the highway through the park, even if it's on the back end of the park, it's going to create a distraction when you go to shows. It's going to limit the park's usability, the friendliness of the park. And I feel like that would be a shame, because the park is such a great asset to the Irwin community. So I kind of see their point here. Usually when I see articles like this and it says so-and-so, descendant of the founder of this or that, I always kind of like look at that and say, who cares? Who cares if you're the founder? Who cares if you descended from the guy who found the town? Do you live there now? Did you meet the guy? No. Irwin was created in the 1800s, so I feel like after 150 years, your family name means a little bit less than maybe it did, I don't know, 2 generations after the guy was born.
And I'm sure if you were like a founding family, then if you didn't anyway stayed engaged, you would have remained influential in that type of decision. You would not have had to come in at the last minute to try and change the course of events.
Exactly. I don't really think they are that influential. So basically, the one woman who is complaining, she is the great-great-great-granddaughter of John Irwin, who created the town. So it's what, like great, 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 granddaughter, then kids. So that's like 5 kids after John Irwin. Who cares? Who cares what you think? However, I do agree with them. So it's kind of one of those things, right? If I disagree with them, then who gives a shit what your opinion is? Who cares who you are? It's, I pay taxes, this or that. But because they're on the same side, now all of a sudden I'm kind of conflicted. I'm feeling like their lineage means something here. Maybe, they have a right to voice their complaint. Maybe they have a right to be upset. Maybe their words have more weight than average Joe. And it's Sandy Altman Jenkins is her name. I wonder if she's related to the Altmans of Altman Farms. There's a housing plan in Irwin called Altman Farms, and it was a farm before it was a housing plan. And I'm just kind of wondering, maybe it's the same family. Maybe there's a connection there.
We've surpassed my awareness of Irwin's history, so I'm not sure I can contribute much.
Wait, so Irwin's a city in Pennsylvania?
Irwin's a borough in Pennsylvania.
It has history?
It has history, yeah. The closest city would be Jeannette, which is very close to Irwin. But Irwin's an interesting town. They have this theater that they just remodeled. It's called the Lamp Theater, and basically, I remember going to the Lamp. What's the shittiest theater either of you have been in? You don't have to name it, but just describe it. What was bad about this theater? Or do you guys have you only ever been to good theaters? Like nice theaters that are...
You mean movie theaters?
Movie theaters, any kind of theater.
I think it's mostly been nice theaters where I've blocked out the awful ones. Most of the awful places I'm in are bars.
Okay. Well, Lamp Theater, this theater used to be a dump. I remember going there when I was a kid. It was actually kind of funny because they would have these movies and they would come out weeks after they made it to the regular theater. And one time we went there and it was for Titanic, and everybody was into this movie Titanic, which I personally was not a big fan of that movie. But at the time it was on the rage. We went to see it at the Lamp Theater, and even though it made it to the Lamp at least a week or two after it ended playing at all the other theaters, the line was going out the door and down the street. It was probably like the largest audience the Lamp had in my entire existence. And we were in there. And in that movie, that one girl, I think her name is Jane. Is that right? The girl who, yeah, she's one of the main characters. I think her name's Jane. But anyways, she's there. Leonardo DiCaprio, his character, he's out. They're all in the water. They're dying. They're cold. And he's just out there yelling, Jane! So my dad starts yelling it in the theater, Jane! 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 And he didn't even want to go to the movie. People were pissed. I was laughing because I was so bored. I was bored to tears. It was like the longest movie.
It's a really long movie.
Yeah, it's a really long movie, and nothing happens in it either. It's a movie of nothing.
It's not true. A boat sinks.
A boat sinks. That's like, 2 minutes of the 3-hour movie.
But I'm just saying, one thing happened.
And it was something that was really, really cool, but if they could have just cut out the other 2.5 hours, actually, if they could have just cut out everything but about 10 minutes, because I think the entire boat sinking took place in about 10 minutes out of that movie, then it would have been a really badass movie. But instead, it was really sappy, really lame, didn't like it. But the Lamp Theater, you would go into this place, and if it rained outside, it rained inside. At certain points, you would be sitting there watching a movie, and parts of the ceiling would start sprinkling down on you because it was in such disrepair. Well, Irwin put in all of this money into the theater, tons of money. There was, I think, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I think there was somewhere around $1 million invested into this theater.
Wow.
Yeah, it would have been cheaper just to doze the thing and rebuild it, but they wanted to build it because they felt it was historically significant to the area and things like that, even though it was actually the second theater in Irwin. Everyone acts like that was the most historical theater in Irwin, but there was actually another theater down the street that was older, but I think they had since destroyed that one. But anyways, it would have been easier to doze it and rebuild it, but they decided to remodel it, and now it's state of the art. It's super awesome, beautiful. The borough owns the theater. They had bought the theater. They've invested a ton of money into the theater. It was a combination of borough money and state money and other finances that went into it. So the council put up on their agenda, they discussed adding a tax to people who are going to the theater. So if you buy a ticket, a little bit of that money goes back to the borough. Does that seem that unreasonable to you guys?
Not terrible.
Aaron, no, not terribly. I don't think it's that unreasonable. I mean, they invested a ton of money, kicks back. It's a way to avoid raising
what's like the
other
percentage?
taxes.
Like, what's
It wasn't even voted on yet. It wasn't decided, but it would have been a small percentage. I mean, the people who voted in favor of it were all staunch supporters of getting the theater up and running. So it's not like they're people who want to destroy the theater. So somebody was mad about it and put an ad. They paid for an ad in the Tribune Review because they still get a print copy of the Tribune Review out in Westmoreland County. And it said, "Stop Gail Machoice and Debbie Kelly, save the Lamp Theater." So they're making it out as if it's like save the clock tower stuff, like this theater is going to close the doors if this small tax goes through. I just thought it was funny. Irwin is a crazy place. You would think when I served on North Irwin Council, you would have thought it was Pittsburgh City Council with as animated as people got. Before I ran for council, there was one council member, and they were all like old people, like I think these two were in their late 60s or early 70s at the time, and one council member literally punched another council member at the meeting. They had to go to the magistrate, who threw the entire case out, told them to grow up, made the guy who punched pay for the court fees. It was crazy. But that's how Irwin is. Like, you would not...
Sounds like that needs to be a reality TV show.
It should have been, yeah. So I ran for council at age like 22 years old, and I ran on a message that council needs to grow up. And that was pretty much my standpoint and my message when I went around. And people went in, they bought it, and they voted me in. And I can say nobody punched anyone else while I was on council. Nobody threw name tags at one another like they did. They would take the name placards on their desk and throw them at one another during council meetings. It was kind of like a big circus. None of that existed when I was on council. So I feel like maybe I did something. Again, they nominated me, the Tribune Review, as, Person of the Year for Westmoreland County, Irwinite of the Year, even though I didn't live in Irwin. I lived in North Irwin. But that's how influential I was in the region. And I turned it down. I don't want to let my ego get ahead of me. I try to stay humble. So, these accolades just keep coming at me, and I just keep staying on the straight and narrow. But that's what's going on in Irwin. Speaking of theaters, Carnegie Science Center, they have opened a new theater. It is no longer the OmniMax Theater. Now it is the Rangos Giant Cinema. And it's supposed to be really, really fantastic. It's top-of-the-line stuff. And I believe one of the reasons why they switched was the OmniMax. There weren't a lot of new stuff being made for the OmniMax, so they wanted to open up their options and things like that. So they came up with this new theater, and I believe they're going to be playing the new Star Wars movie in the OmniMax Theater. So I'm very excited about that. It's something I definitely want to check out. And it got me thinking about this article I saw from Michael Sorg. Yeah.
Wait, it's no longer an OmniMax now, though, right?
No, it's not an OmniMax anymore. Yeah, it's this state-of-the-art, like, huge mega theater.
So is the screen smaller or bigger?
I think the screen is bigger, from what I understand. I haven't checked it out yet. I'm excited.
But it's going to be flat, unlike the OmniMax, which is...
Yes, but it's going to be... Yeah, the OmniMax, was very circular, and I really liked that feature to it, so I'm kind of going to miss that, I think. But I'm really looking forward to checking it out. And I think Star Wars is going to be great there to see that. So that is one thing that is kind of sad, because the OmniMax was only one of a handful of those domed theaters in the country. So it was really unique, and it was really special that this area had access to a theater like that. So it's kind of, in some ways, disappointing to see it go. And I've seen some really, really fascinating things there. And one of the things I liked about the OmniMax was, because it was round, I was there once, and I went to see the space special, and it was really cool, and they had a rocket that lifted off. And because of the shape of the screen, it almost looked 3D. Even though it wasn't the 3D glasses, it had that, because there was a depth to it, with it being the round screen, it had a feel of if you were actually, with the sound that was coming at you, the size of the rocket launching, and because of the shape of the screen, you really felt like you were there watching this rocket take off into outer space.
Flying shots on an OmniMax feel awesome, because it looks like you're flying. Like, you just see the movement on that curves thing, and your body's like, "Well, we're flying," and you're like, "No, we're not," but your body thinks you are.
Yeah. Let's see what the description says. It says, bigger, bolder, better. Carnegie Science Center delights, educates, and inspires through interactive experiences in science and technology. The Rango's Giant Cinema will stay true to the vision by demonstrating technological and scientific advances in audio and visual experiences that are unparalleled in our region. So, yeah, it sounds like it's more of a regular theater, but everything is intense. So yeah, they are having Star Wars there. I'm looking right now. It's coming December 15th through January 11th, and the tickets are on sale now. I'm excited to see the new movie. I feel like Disney is doing a great job, except for the way that they're treating hardcore Star Wars loyalists. So outside of that, I like the movies they're putting out there. I think they're far superior to the prequels that George Lucas did, in my opinion. Not in the way they look, the storytelling, everything about them I like much better. One thing I don't like is how they are treating the expanded universe. Are either of you Star Wars fans?
Yeah.
No, you're not a Star Wars fan.
I mean, I've seen the movies, but beyond like the movies, I don't have much awareness of like the
culture of it.
The outer storylines.
Sure. So basically, expanded universe is everything that happens outside of the movie realm, books, comic books, things like that. And in Star Wars, the Star Wars world, expanded universe was always considered to be canon. So what happens in expanded universe is considered legitimate in the Star Wars timeline. Disney moves in. They want to make all of these movies after episode 6, like they're doing 7, 8, and 9 right now. And they want those to be canon, and they want to be able to do whatever they want to do. So they said, you know what? All of these books that have been written for years and have extended the life of Star Wars for a long time, because really, if you think about it, the end of Episode 6 and the beginning of Episode 1, there were a lot of years in between those. So
16, I think.
Something like that, yeah, a long time between the two. And those expanded universe books...
99?
99 was episode 1. Let me think. Star Wars came out in...
83 is Return of the Jedi.
So, yeah. So a long time. In those expanded universe books and comic books and things like that, they really kept the Star Wars universe going. But what Disney's doing is they've said none of that's canon. It's all legends now. But now they're going back through expanded universe and picking out all of the different characters and situations that they liked and throwing them into the movies. So it's somewhat hypocritical. It's very hypocritical, in my opinion, what Disney is doing with these storylines where they're saying, no, this isn't real, this doesn't count, but now we'll still take this character. You know, Timothy Zahn, your books don't count, but Grand Admiral Thrawn, we like him. We're going to put him in the new cartoon series that we're making. And that's kind of the way that Disney's playing it. They're taking everything out of expanded universe that's really popular. They're making it canon in the movies, but then they're not giving those authors and creators the credit for creating those characters in those storylines.
They're not giving them any royalty checks?
I don't know about that. I don't know how much they would have rights to that because Star Wars is all under the Star Wars name. They probably do. That's interesting. That's an interesting point. I just don't like it at the face of it. I just think it's a little hypocritical for them to say, no, it's not canon. But
this is a common story within business of when someone buys an entity, when someone buys a brand, and they're maybe now supposed to be a steward of it, but they aren't the initial founder. They didn't have that initial vision, the loyalty. They don't have that same feeling of obligation to maintain the history and the culture that's been built around it. They're going to shape it to fit their purposes and their needs. And I mean, I think they bought it for $5 billion originally.
It was a lot of money, yeah.
And they made $3 billion just off of the first movie in Rogue One. So they're going to very easily recoup their initial investment, and that's going to be a huge return for Disney.
Oh, it's going to be huge for Disney. I agree. But I find what you say funny, and you're right. But George Lucas himself, the creator of Star Wars, had no respect for Star Wars in the original storyline either. You had digitally remastered where they went through and fixed up things, as he says, to make it look better. Then you had the
special. Of course, they changed it so Greedo fires first.
I don't know if that was that done in the digitally remastered version, or was that done in the special edition? Because then he goes back and does the special edition.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so digitally remastered, I think, was pretty close to the original, but they touched things up.
They got rid of the titty in the in episode 6.
Okay. I would not be surprised. Yeah, they changed everything.
Point of contention.
There's the slave girl gets thrown down into what's the name of the
Zarlak
pit beast?
pit?
Yes, gets thrown out into Zarlak, and as she's in this V type piece where there's bands coming up that cover each nipple and like meet around, as she's getting thrown down, human and a breast pops out physics and when they did the remaster they were like, nope, we're
special
making this
edition.
really PG.
I guarantee that was more of a special edition ploy.
I think so.
Digitally
remastered is what, because it's just a quick little CGI.
So they had to digitally remastered. And one good thing about the digitally remastered version is they actually added a scene that they couldn't add in the original. So in the original scene, if you remember in episode 4, there's the scene where Han Solo comes in and he's at the Millennium Falcon, and Jabba comes with his goons to try to collect on the money. Jabba the Hutt, who's a villain in Star Wars. He comes to collect the money. This is after Han kills Greedo. And in that case, I believe Han still did shoot first. There's a big controversy because they changed the storyline in the special edition. Anyways, Jabba comes in, and Han walks around Jabba and steps on his tail. Originally, there was a problem with that. The guy who played Jabba was just a guy in a furry suit, like a human in a furry suit. He wasn't the big slug. So when Han walked around him, they thought, oh shit, what do we do? He walks around this guy. He's got this giant tail. How do we make up for that? So that's why they have him stepping on his tail, was because it was originally shot with a guy. They didn't have a concept of Jabba at the time, or if they did, they didn't shoot it that way because George Lucas didn't know if he would get to episode 6. So anyways, he goes back and he rechanges all of the movies, and he even takes out actors. The guy who played Anakin, for example, in episode 6, the ghost figure of Anakin, he removes that guy and puts in Hayden Christensen. Yep. He changes the voice of Boba Fett. But what's so crazy about all of it is George Lucas testified before Congress in opposition to the colorization of old black and white movies, claiming that you cannot edit or change a finished product. Yet he goes back and completely changes his movies all the time. Then George Lucas sells the rights of Star Wars to Disney. And what does he do after that? He's constantly in the media bitching and whining and moaning about the changes that Disney is making to the franchise that he gave up. George Lucas, you gave up Star Wars. It's your fault. If you don't like it, you should never have sold it to Disney in the first place. And I feel like it's very unprofessional the way he's handling the whole situation. He made the decision to sell it.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
You're going to say yes to $5 billion, you're going to eat a little bit of crow.
Exactly. And that's kind of my point. If he wanted to have complete control over the franchise, then he should have never sold it to Disney. But honestly, if I was Disney, I'd be pretty upset with the way he's handling this situation. I mean, I guess they don't care because they're making all of this money. They're pulling out an entire new park that they are adding in Disney, a Star Wars park. So I guess they really don't care.
It's amazing how engaging this has been for little kids. Niece and nephew of mine, they just love it. They have all the new characters. They're so engaged with Star Wars, and now they're going back and watching the old stuff, which they otherwise wouldn't have engaged with. But this has really just kind of brought it to life. I mean, that's what happens. They put a lot of marketing dollars behind it.
Oh yeah, and it's good too. Like the new Star Wars movies they're so much better than the prequels, and there's nothing I like more than to see these kids going and dressing up as these new characters, because at least it's burying that old garbage that came out from episodes 1, 2, 3. I mean, they were horrible movies. I'm sorry, I don't care. People try to say, oh yeah, they're not as good as the originals, but but there was this and there was that, and then. No, they were garbage movies. If they didn't have the Star Wars name attached to it, you wouldn't like it. You wouldn't have bought the movies. They're not good movies, Eric.
There's a couple of big issues with them. One of the things
A couple? There's entire documentaries that were built designed to show the inconsistencies between the prequels and the originals.
But also primarily special effects weren't quite ready, and on top of that, they weren't consistent with the special effects. How are you going to have Luke have to use a plank in episode 6 in order to do a backflip, and then in episode 1 you've got Obi-Wan like jumping like 3 stories at one time without breaking a sweat?
But why would he even do that? The human body can't physically do any of that
they
stuff.
should have, but also the whole...
And yoga fighting was not cool, it was stupid. And you're wrong if you think otherwise.
They shouldn't have had the Aqua World. Somehow the special effects weren't as good.
See, I actually liked that. I thought that was one of the scenes I really liked. I will give episode 1 credit for that. I thought a lot of the scenery was beautiful.
Really? Because how do you go underwater, have an underwater world, and have it not look as good as the Abyss? Like, when you're doing it, like, 13 years later. Like, I felt like the whole underwater, the concept was cool, but I didn't think it was visually executed well. And then, no actors or writer were vetoing Lucas on that script, and he is just not good at writing dialogue.
He's not good at writing dialogue, and he also comes up with some terrible concepts. Like Darth Vader originally, the reason why he had this helmet on was because Darth Vader wasn't originally supposed to be a cyborg. That was a suit, and he was going to fly into the Tantive 4, which was the first starship in Episode 4, which was really, really stupid. What came about was much cooler, and if you ask any Star Wars fan, or most Star Wars fans, which is the best movie, most of them will point towards Episode 5, which is the movie that Lucas had the least amount to do with. So... the more power George Lucas has, the worse the movies become. Just look at episode 1. We're going to roll right into the weird news. Let's cue up that music here on Pittsburgh's voice for local music, The River's Edge. Got 3 really great stories for you today. I'm bringing you all the stories. Bringing you all the stories because Michael is out shopping. Just can't get enough of those deals. I am Pittsburgh's #1 weapon against the Mon Monster, bringing you not 1, not 2, but 3 weird stories to keep the Mon Monster at bay, where I, Brian Crawford, Pittsburgh's magazine, Pittsburgher of the Year, at least in theory, will save the entire city from total and complete destruction from the Mon Monster right now with the first story, which has to do with some unusual discipline. There's been a lot of discussion over the years about how much freedom teachers should have in disciplining students in public schools and private schools as well. Right now, it's very limited in what teachers can do, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. One teacher we're going to talk about, she's a 34-year-old woman. She went the complete opposite direction. And you always hear your parents telling you stories about how they were paddled and things like that, or not, maybe not your parents, but somebody in your family, some old-timer, and they always act like things were better back then because kids had discipline and, the firm hand of the teacher kept kids in line and all these other old-timey things to say that just really just justify abuse in a lot of cases. But this woman, she thought that the paddling didn't go far enough. She went a complete different direction. She's from Des Moines, Iowa, and she teaches at Kensington Elementary School, and she allegedly, a 400-pound woman, allegedly sat on a student's head and farted. And that was a form of punishment that this teacher...
Did the child live?
Yeah, so it says here, this article comes from World News Daily.
Pounds on a child.
The 34-year-old woman, Anne Margaret DeVille, apparently wanted to teach the student a valuable lesson after the young man allegedly made a public comment on her ugly fat ass.
Here's the thing. Teachers, as much as that kid was probably a twerp and needed some discipline and some punishment...
Yes.
There's a degree of being a teacher, you have to understand that they're kids. They're going to misbehave. They're going to be little brats.
Yes.
And you can't stoop to their level. You have to maintain...
So you can't sit on their head and fart.
You have to maintain a degree of composure and professionalism because you're the professional.
Well, do they say if she's being charged yet or what they're considering charging her with? Because that... I think there's a possibility where they could charge her with a sex crime.
The quotes here are fantastic. That is a good point. One of the quotes here, it says, she pushed him to the ground, lifted her robe, and just sat her ass on his face and then let out the biggest fart in front of all of the classmates. This is what this one girl is saying about the incident. She says, he gasped for air, thought he was going to die. That's what the victim's mother is saying. And worst of all, she wasn't wearing any panties. What kind of sick person does that to an 11-year-old? So those are our quotes from his mother. So what's the worst punishment you've ever had at school? Have you ever...
Not something that resulted in someone being on Megan's list.
Nothing that bad?
Nothing that close. I would mess around a lot in gym class and just defy rules, but there's nothing quite like that.
I was like a super douchebag in the band probably my junior and a few years. So basically, we got a band director. It's not our fault. I'm going to put it that way. Like you said, kids will be kids, and you have to know how to deal with kids, right? So we had a band director who would publicly cry in front of high school kids.
Bad move.
During band practice. So we had two different band directors. The main band director, he would never do anything like that. He was kind of crazy. He would get mad during band practice and throw a metronome off the band tower, breaking equipment to try to, prove a point, whereas the other guy would cry when things didn't go his way. So then, of course, the kids would torture him. And then my senior year, and I'm still bitter about this, not really, but it did happen. Every year, at the Norwin Band, they had two concert bands. They had the Symphonic Band and the Wind Symphony, and the Wind Symphony was the more prestigious of the two. And every year, the seniors would get put into the Wind Symphony just for dealing with their bullshit for 4 years. Well, the year I turned a senior, they decided to get rid of that policy. So I used to build towers out of the mutes, and they would collapse in the middle of practice. I would hand out candy and sugar to all of the kids because they were mostly underclassmen in Symphonic Band. I would hand them all candy and sugar, which gunks up your horn so that way you can't play properly right before major performances and things like that. My friend and I, we actually switched instruments in the middle of a parade at Disney, and we would have these conversations, and I remember they moved her. We would sit right next to each other in band class, and they would move, Kelly was her name, a seat over. So that way we couldn't talk to each other. So we just started talking louder. And I remember the one time, he finally called me out because he was always afraid to call me out because this guy was just, and I feel bad. I was a jerk to this guy, but I mean, it wasn't just me. But he calls me out the one day, and he's up there crying. And I actually felt bad for him. It was something unrelated to me. And he goes over to me, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Yeah, laugh it up, Brian. Keep on laughing." And I'm sitting there, I'm not even laughing. I feel bad for you. But anyways, yeah, I never really got punished. It was more the opposite. I kind of punished this poor guy. And one time we were in a parade preparing for Disney, and I remember this is with the main band director. He's in the back of the band. I'm up in the front with the trumpet section, and I'm playing just way out of tune, trying to just ruin the performance, ruin the practice. So he comes running up from the back where he's with the drums, trying to find out who's out of tune, and I start playing perfectly. He runs back to the drums. I had this guy running back and forth from the back of the room to the front the entire practice. It was fantastic. Our second weird news story for the day.
Time out. Did you just call North Irwin Norwin?
Norwin is the name of the school district.
Okay.
So out in Irwin, there's North Irwin, and there's North Huntingdon. North Huntingdon actually surrounds both Irwin and North Irwin. It's a much bigger township. And all three of them share one common school district, and that's called the Norwin School District.
Okay,
so,
I thought it was just an abbreviation you had for North Irwin. You were just Norwin,
No, that would be super lazy. Yeah, that would be super lazy. But you know what? We do live in a world where that would probably happen because nobody can say anything. It's just everybody's got to have a shortcut for everything, which I don't really understand why. Sometimes you don't need a shortcut. Sometimes it's actually harder to say the shortcut than it is to just say the words, right?
You're not about that abbreviated life?
I'm not about the abbreviated life. No, not at all. Our second weird news story, everybody knows about this story. It's been all over the place, but I want to bring an interesting and different take to it. It's about the man the flat earth man who has built his own rocket. He's using science to disprove science. He's claiming that the world is not round. He's actually said he doesn't think it's just flat. He thinks it's like a disc, almost like a CD.
Okay.
And that's kind of how he views the world. And he's built this rocket that he is going to launch from his house, a rocket that he has built, and he is going to travel to the edge of the earth to prove that the earth is indeed flat and not wrong. Now, do we know, is the earth round as a fact, or is that a theory? Is it fake, like gravity, global warming, all of that stuff? Just a theory. Is it fake news, or is it really round? We've got Aaron here, Aaron Watson of Going Deep with Aaron Watson. He recently traveled to the edge of the earth, and I'm interested to hear, did you travel by plane or did you travel by boat or ferry?
So I spent half the year, we took a flight out of New York City to Hong Kong.
So you did fly.
Spent half the year in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Taipei, Thailand, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Japan. So I'm familiar with that part of the world and have experienced, FaceTiming friends and family back home. And it's nighttime, it's getting dark, and they're waking up and, rubbing the sleepies out of their eyes because they just woke up, because it's an exact 12-hour difference if you are in Thailand and you're calling East Coast United States.
See, I don't know if I buy that argument. I mean, you're talking about time differences. Did you actually travel around the entire world?
I went up above the clouds and went to the other side of the globe.
Okay, but I mean, the sun does travel around the earth. Is it not possible that if the earth is like a CD, the sun came up on this side of the earth and down on the other side of the earth, thus making night and day in different sides of the earth depending on where the sun is moving? And that is a possibility.
So I haven't, to any extent, looked into the research on people who believe in the flat earth. However, just that explanation, like it going down on one end of the earth and then all of a sudden reappearing on the other end, doesn't really seem to make sense.
Why? If it's like a frisbee, it could flip. There could be an entire other plane of existence on the other side of the earth that you aren't really thinking about.
All be in darkness at the exact same time, and that's not the case, because I'd wake up in the morning and all my friends would have sent me messages because they were up.
Maybe there's two suns. Maybe we don't even realize that there's a second sun circling the earth.
That seems significantly more reasonable.
Did you just call us Tatooine? Is that just what you said?
Well, Tatooine's a round planet. We're talking about
how do you know?
We're talking about more
because you could see
Tatooine from space.
Yeah, you see it as a flat image.
That is true, actually. That's a fair point. Now, you traveled by plane. Did you have a window seat?
Yes.
Okay, did you observe the way the Earth looked as you were traveling?
I mean, there's certainly a degree of it not looking like we're moving in a straight line. Like you can see the clouds go away.
So you felt like you were kind of arcing?
Certainly.
Is it possible, though, that the Earth is just a giant hump?
Anything
and it is flat on the other side. I mean,
anything's possible. I'm not all-knowing.
You're not all-knowing. So basically, you've traveled the world, but you can't bring us anything to the table to prove your round Earth theory. Is that what you're saying?
I haven't heard an argument against the time difference and it literally being completely different times.
I completely addressed that with the two-sun model.
The two-sun model? Sure, I can't just
it is possible.
Two-sun concept that you've got.
If the world
this
is
two-sun model that no scientist has ever even considered,
at least 0.00001% of scientists have subscribed to the two-sun model.
Hard to argue with that.
I'm actually going to have to argue with that because I've not heard any scientist.
You can't argue with facts. You're talking to the Pittsburgher of. You're talking to Pittsburgh Magazine's Pittsburgher of the Year. I would not steer you wrong. I think the two-sun.
That's a statement that's made that is not a fact. Actually,
how do you explain the seasons?
That's
then?
an opinion.
How do you explain the seasons then? Like, why was it hot as fire, literally 90 degrees? I'm drenched in sweat, and over back in Pittsburgh, people were shoveling.
Well, that's easy to explain. You've got the moon, and the moon is pulling the water in different directions, and based on the flow of the water, it brings different climates to different regions. I mean, the wind comes off of the water, and based on the temperature of the water, it will change the air quality as it moves across the surface of the globe.
But why don't we have a unified season if it's flat?
Because you've got different waterways.
We're all experiencing the same altitude. We're all experiencing
not necessarily. If you go with the hump theory, the humped Earth theory. So
you don't even have a unified theory. It could be two.
I'm just saying there are different options.
Be a hump.
You're talking about.
Wouldn't a hump theory be different than a flat Earth though? Isn't that how did the flat Earthers?
Because it's still flat on the bottom.
So if the Earth is like a CD, first of all, where's the empty center? Explain that. And secondly, that means that man is saying the Earth is going to be obsolete in 5 years. That's what he's saying.
We'll all be on the cloud.
We better figure out how to populate one of Jupiter's moons.
So do you have any hard evidence to your theory that the Earth is round?
The fact... I still haven't heard a compelling argument against the time zone part, so I'm going to stick with that.
Sticking with the time zone, I think that's a pretty easy one to understand. The two sun model. I'm sticking with that. Do you have any evidence, Eric? I know you have. Have you traveled to Asia ever?
I have not. My family went to China. I have been to South America. I've been to Peru.
Now, when they traveled to China, did they go two different directions? Did they go across the Pacific one way and the Atlantic the other way?
I think they may have. I'd have to double check because I know that they...
So they probably went through the vortex which takes you to the other side.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a vortex that, when you go through that vortex, you end up on the other side of the globe.
Have you ever heard the concept of Occam's razor?
No, can you tell me?
Occam's razor is whenever there is a family of explanations that can explain something, 99% of the time, the simple explanation is the one that is accurate.
So the two-sun model, like I said, it makes so much sense.
What Aaron's saying is that your event horizon theory is not Occam's razor.
I think it makes a ton. Ignoring the fact that it's totally a government conspiracy.
That's what I'm saying. They've got all these pictures. They've got these pictures of Earth from space. All I'm saying is the people who think that's real are the same people that think that we walked on the moon. Third story. The third story is an interesting Airbnb. If I can find the third story.
I don't think we walked on the moon. Just to cover that, I know I have not been on the moon.
You have not been on the moon.
Nope, never claiming that.
A lot of pronouns being thrown around.
I don't
know. You guys are the ones. You're the crazy ones that don't. You're the crazy ones that think the Earth revolves around the sun. That's all I'm saying. Oh God. So
crazy like Nostradamus.
There's an interesting.
Kids call me.
I'm trying to pull this up here. I don't have that article up. There's an Airbnb, an interesting Airbnb room that I think is really. Oh, that's why, because I can't spell correctly. It's a missile silo, basically. They turned a missile silo into an Airbnb room. And if I can find the information, I'll
one of the old Nike silos, or?
It's interesting. The picture's up. I'll pull it up here. And
you know what I'm talking about with the Nike site.
Yeah, I am, actually. Speaking of Irwin...
Nike site up in Renderdale?
They're all over the nation.
They're already all over, especially in this area. People don't realize this, but Pittsburgh was actually really high up on the list of cities that the Soviet Union were targeting for an attack at one point because of the industry here in Pittsburgh and things like that. So there were Nike sites all over the Pittsburgh area. And there's actually a soccer field speaking back to the North Huntington area. There's a soccer field in North Huntington called the Nike site. And it's because it was literally built over top of an old Nike site. And it's kind of cool. The only thing that I wish, though, is I wish they would have kept it as a missile silo, not filled with missiles, but more as a way for people to go and explore it and maybe give tours. I think that would be a really fascinating thing to be able to go down and see what the silo looked like and where the missiles were and that kind of a thing. Do they have something like that?
There's one in Cleveland that you can look at from the outside. I don't think you can go inside and take a tour, but I don't think it's been taken down. We off of 480, close to, I'm going to mispronounce this, but close to NASA.
Oh, okay. So we have this picture behind us here of the missile silo. It's really, really fantastic looking. And here's the article. I have it pulled up. It says, in what is likely to be a unique vacation experience, travelers can now rent a Cold War-era missile silo to crash at during their visits to Kansas, a report says. And it's literally a missile silo that's been converted into a place for you to stay. So that's kind of weird, but I think that's really interesting. Can you imagine, though, if this area would have been attacked by the Soviet Union, if they had dropped a bomb on the Pittsburgh region, and particularly like the Pittsburgh city, the city of Pittsburgh. That would have been crazy. People who have moved out of the city or people who had relatives in other places, there would be nothing left of their loved ones. And a missile like that would have wiped out Hahn Funeral Home. And without Hahn Funeral Home, where would you take your people, where would you take your loved ones to get a respectable, decent funeral service? Some corporate shill? I don't know, some mega funeral home conglomerate? I don't even want to think of a world where, like say you guys passed away here in the studio.
You have a lot less competition for Pittsburgh Person of the Year.
There is no competition. Let's just put it that way. The only reason why other people win is because I humble myself and let it be so. But what I'm saying is, if everybody here dies, I'm going to take you to Hahn's because it's the only family-owned funeral home in Millvale, and they specialize in green burials so we can be friendly to the earth. Wow. Our business is being taken care of. But with a missile that would have hit Pittsburgh, there would be no Hahn's, and people wouldn't know where to go. People wouldn't know where to take their loved ones. So thank God we got out of the Cold War era without any missiles striking the Pittsburgh region. That's all I really have to say.
You think the Mon monster's a problem now? Imagine them irradiated.
Oh, I know.
You have dozens of them.
It's already, the pollution. As if the pollution in the debris in the rivers wasn't bad enough, you would have to deal with all of that craziness. Aaron, you've got a big summit coming up, the Going Deep Summit.
Yes, January 27th at the Kelly Strayhorn Theater. You were talking about old theaters of Pittsburgh. Kelly Strayhorn's an old one. Both my parents back in the day watched movies there. It's now converted to a live event space. So the last Saturday of January, we're going to be getting together on that Saturday for a full day of talks from some really impactful, influential thinkers, entrepreneurs in the region. Leah Lizarrando from 412 Food Rescue, who is becoming a rock star not only within the Pittsburgh community but beyond, helping solve the problem of food deserts and connecting.
Which still exists in many areas, this food desert
problem. People do not appreciate that.
Yeah.
We're in a food desert.
We are.
Right
Here
now.
in Millville, technically, is considered a food desert.
Yeah, so they work with large corporate partners who would otherwise, throw their food away. They have some local heroes who use their app, pick that up, deliver it to food banks, other places in need, and that gets distributed to people. So she is just a really innovative social entrepreneur. Another game-changing social entrepreneur, Dan Bull of 068. 068 is the number that if you are in prison, identifies you as being from Allegheny County. And what Dan does is creates opportunities for previously incarcerated felons when they come out to find work. A lot of these people are just looking for any sort of opportunity, any sort of chance. They vet these people and hook them up with local startups who are in need of relatively cheaper human capital.
Okay.
A lot of startups, they aren't necessarily being able to hand out that massive 5-figure, 6-figure salary, and they get these ex-cons into positions where their talents can be used, and the startups get access to a lot of untapped human potential in the Allegheny
That's fantastic.
region.
I know Zach can testify that we only have the highest wages here at the River's Edge.
Oh, don't even get me started on my salary.
Yeah. Couldn't ask for a better one.
Yeah.
So, no, that's really fantastic.
And part of the reason we put it at the end of January is a lot of people...
I was going to ask that, yeah.
For their New Year's resolution, they say, I want to change my job. I want to change the trajectory of my career. I want to get engaged with what's happening locally. I want to connect with the other people who have this similar ambitions, who aren't ready to be complacent or content with wherever they stand, whatever industry they may be in. And not only are you going to hear from a lot of people who are making it happen for themselves, professional speakers, authors, social entrepreneurs, but the 250 people in the crowd are going to be cut from that same cloth. So in between talks, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to connect with the other movers and shakers in the city of Pittsburgh. And there's not a lot of cultural events in the city that bring that to the table, which is what I was trying to do.
Well, what's really interesting about that decision, I didn't even think about the New Year's resolution aspect to it, but that's a really good point because a lot of people right after the end of the month, they start abandoning their resolutions. They start going back the other direction. So by doing this and having it at the end, you can maybe encourage those people to take the next step and keep their faith and keep their commitment to their goals. Is that part of the thinking?
Absolutely. And there's the cynical side of things that people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And there's a cynical way to look at that. And then kind of an optimistic way to look at it is if you can just get in the room with the right people, your outcomes, your opportunities change. I think one of the truisms of self-help and personal development is you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And when you spend the most time with people who are ambitious, who are making things happen for themselves, you can bounce ideas off of those people. They can give you real, meaningful feedback as opposed to speaking with someone who doesn't really know what you're talking about or where you're coming from. If you are, trying to build a massive radio studio, it doesn't help to bounce all of your ideas off of people with no experience in media and no experience in building a business. It's the people who've walked the walk or in the process of doing it themselves that can give you the most meaningful feedback for someone who's hustling like that.
Sure. Well, one thing I will say, the people who say it's not what you know, it's who you know, and they look at that as a negative, I actually throw that back at them because you make your own connections. So this is a great opportunity, but how many people, and this is why I'm hoping everybody can come out to this event, which it's going to be great. It's January 27th.
At the Kelly
Tickets are available on the 4th.
Yep.
So, but January 27th, it's at 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
And
everyone who's listening to the show, if they use the code EDGE, we're going to get 50% off tickets. They're available now, but they're going up December 4th.
So definitely check that out. But I always say about people like that is how many people will not come January 27th, 9 to 4:30 p.m., and then say the same thing. Oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
You make your own connections. You kind of, I always feel, pave your own path. And if you want something and you're that committed to it, you'll make the connections that you need to place yourself in a position of success. This theater, or this room where we're recording in, was the former Mr. Small's recording studio before it moved to the north side. 2.5 years ago, I never met Mike Spranzo or Liz Berlin, the owners of this building, but I started going to the Acoustic Cafe. I started talking to them. We became friends. They knew what I was doing. I was involved with things at Smalls. And then they asked us when our building burnt down if this is a spot that we thought we could make our home. But that was a connection that I built over 2.5 years. It wasn't the fact where I knew everybody in the music scene and I just had this handed to me. No, you build your own connections and you work hard to make that happen. And I feel like a lot of people think that everybody who has any kind of connection, they just knew the right people or their parents were wealthy or something like that. And that's not the case.
Some of the lessons I've learned from my show, and there's a great parallel with your story there, is that all the people with the credentials, the accomplishments, the resume that you might look up to and be impressed by, it's because they put in the work. And there was maybe even a decade of just grinding through the miserable part of building something, and then it popped and you're like, oh, this person's an overnight sensation. I've covered a multitude of stories like that on my podcast, but
going deep with Aaron Watson.
But yours is a perfect example where the reason that someone would reach out to you, the reason that someone would open their doors to you is because they've seen the work that you're putting in. They know that you're hustling. They know that you're consistent in your production. And that's the thing that people want to rally around. What people don't necessarily realize, they feel really self-conscious about asking for something or taking something. And that makes sense if you haven't put in any work. But if you've put in some work, there is an immense psychic benefit to the people who send the elevator back down for the next person. Once you've made it, you're on the lookout for other people.
Oh, absolutely.
You can put on.
Well, that's like the easiest person to get in for an interview is somebody who's involved in the media. Because they've been there, they've done it, they understand what it's like to... And people who've gone through the media, traditional media, in some ways I have it easier, in some ways I have it harder with the format that we have here at the River's Edge. Because I started a network, I can do what I want. So I didn't have to go through that starting as a part-time board op and grinding my way up for years and years. But I also have to work around the clock 24/7 to keep a network up and running, myself and the partners and other people involved here. So there are different challenges, but they still understand the road. So they're willing to come on and throw their name and their fans at you to try to help you out as well. So it's interesting to see those kind of relationships, and it's always easy to get those interviews.
And even beyond that, so there's a degree of putting people on and a degree of giving someone a shot. But even further, some of my best friends these days who I've made through engaging with Pittsburgh's entrepreneurial community are the folks who are also trying to do it themselves. And there's some stuff that people just can't relate to. So talking about this headache or the fact that you're, dealing with an unruly employee over here or something is only relatable to other folks who have been through the fire. And whether it's advice or even just like being able to commiserate and share that understanding is something that you search for. Like, because that's not something a lot of the older friends that have been around, they're great for, having a drink or doing some other stuff with, but they can't necessarily relate to those type of stories.
Sure. But I think sometimes those friends are important to keep around as well, certainly, because they offer you a different perspective of maybe an audience member, somebody who's going to be involved and in looking at your product, and they know in some ways have a different perspective than somebody who's on the top. Because I think you have to balance yourself, because you also want to keep yourself grounded in many ways and remember, I guess you want to remember that guy who's going to be your consumer as well. You don't want to lose your consumer thinking about the prospects of revenue and things like that as well. Does
Absolutely.
that make sense to you?
I totally agree. And some of the people who are going to be in that audience as well are doing some innovative stuff. We have some people who have really built followings on Instagram and Snapchat that are going to be there. They're going to be just in the crowd, like talking about what they're doing. They're going to be creating content. There's all sorts of just ways to think about where things are going as part of the new media. We also have the opportunity to play with format, to play with medium, to be creative and develop communication skills and be more nimble than some of those older institutions. Like I've spoken with folks at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. They're just launching their first podcast and asked me for advice. And it's like, well, sure, they have, the money and all this other stuff to kind of make that push. But when it's not your DNA, when it's not what you've started with from the ground up, it's just going to have a different feel for it. You can't jump into it with all that history of the institution behind you. So I think it's a place to be creative. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, quite frankly. These are the type of events, I've been to South by Southwest, Digital Life Design Conference, Next Gen Summit, all these others, and I've kind of taken pieces, similar to Thrival, also that happens to go on in September, taken pieces and ideas from those that I like and try to make my own swing on it with the Going Deep Summit.
Yeah, I'm very excited. How much are tickets for this event?
They are $50 right now, 50% off with that EDGE coupon code for anyone listening right now, and they go up to $60 on December 4th, so people should move.
Wow, very cool. So it sounds exciting. It's definitely something that's on my radar. I'm hoping to be able to go to this because just to be able to be in a room like that and speak to so many different people who are working on building their businesses and their brands, it's great to just kind of bounce ideas. I know we do a lot, and I don't know if do you get invited to the coffee meetings?
Which coffee meetings?
Sorgatron Media Coffee.
I've had the invite a couple times. I don't know if I've ever made it.
Yeah, that's like a kind of on a much smaller schedule. I mean, this conference is going to be fantastic because you're bringing in all these guest speakers. But even that on a local level, it's great because you've got different podcasters and you've got people of different levels. You've got Michael Sorg. You were just on his show with AwesomeCast. He's been doing podcasting. I think he actually coined the term podcast. He's been doing it for so long.
Yeah. And
then you've got someone kind of who's built a brand like myself, for example, who's built a brand, but maybe I don't have that decade of experience that Sorg has. And then you've got people who are literally walking into this coffee meeting who have never even recorded anything for podcasting. So you've got such a variety of people, and it's great to share different experiences even on that small level.
And the other thing I was trying to solve for is Pittsburgh started to become not through any sort of fault, but something of a fractured community where you have these different subgroups, and you can't always stir the pot and bounce all those groups into one another. So hopefully, not that every single community will have 100% representation there, but hopefully a few people from all of the smaller entrepreneurial communities. We've got the Pittsburgh Young Professionals, we've got the Pittsburgh Professional Women, we've got Venture for America, Praxis, all these different groups around town. They send a few people, they get a couple new ideas, they get inspired, and they can bring that energy back. And then you start to have a cultural stake that the entire entrepreneurial community can rally around, which is at least the goal.
Yeah, that's going to be great. I'm excited. It's January 27th 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at the Kelly Strayhorn Theater, which is on Penn Avenue, 5941 Penn Avenue.
Free lunch for everyone who
free lunch too. There you go. See, that's an extra incentive. But honestly, that's a big deal because if you're downtown, you could be spending, or you're in the city, you could be spending a decent amount on lunch.
Brand new restaurant opening up, Chula. They're trying to be the Chipotle of Indian food, 1 block away, and they're hooking everyone up with an entree who shows up.
Very cool. So, and I know, Eric, you've got something coming up as well. That's Aaron Watson, the Going Deep Summit, January 27th, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. What do you have on the horizon?
I have the Last Koala Fearsome Koala Show coming up this weekend at an undisclosed location.
So how do you get people there if it's undisclosed?
Well, you message us at the Facebook event or either email me at comicaledubs@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter, and I will let you know what that location is. I can tell you guys once this stops rolling, but this is a little hush-hush, secret, like a VIP type thing.
That's interesting. So that's an interesting concept. There's kind of like an intrigue in the mystery as well.
Where is it? Where is it going to be at a bed and breakfast? Is it going to be in a missile silo? Is it going to be in a bear's mouth? I don't know. There's options. I mean, it's probably next to like some closed down steel factory because we're Pittsburgh, but like it's somewhere.
Could it be on the dark side of the earth?
It's on the flat side of the earth.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone from Pittsburgh could actually think there's a flat earth. Like I don't understand that.
You haven't met very many Yinzers then.
Pittsburgh's interesting. So, like, basically, there's this article or a study that came out, and basically they looked at the number of libraries we have. They looked at the number of universities that we have here in Pittsburgh, and they determined that Pittsburgh was one of the most educated cities in the United States. And I always thought, that's got to be a bunch of baloney. That can't be the case. Well, then, I was listening to some discussions that media people were having with voters in Roy Moore's district, and there was a woman who sounded more masculine than most, or not more masculine, I'm sorry, more misogynistic than most men that I've met here in Pittsburgh, and I thought maybe we are one of the more intelligent places when she's, on there. God, it was crazy. She literally was on the interview, this woman. I wish I had her name, but she was on this interview saying how some of the young girls in that community look like they're older, and she was basically making excuses for what Roy Moore allegedly has done.
Back in my day, we didn't talk about such things. It was normal.
It was frightening. So, John Oldsfield, before we move into our last segment and wrap up the show, he had some interesting comments here. I'm looking to find the great one here. It's really kind of hard to do on this. I got this new iPad, which is great. It is wonderful. I've got this iPad, and all of my notes are on here, and it's allowing me to do so many great things. The one comment here I'm seeing from him is that the student that got sat on went to the dark side. There was another comment he had that I had seen that was really pretty funny. Okay. He said he had been paddled in school a few times, and he can't say it was the good old days, but, he was saying that kids had more respect for elders back in those days. I thought that was an interesting comment, and I think there is some validity to that. I don't think that is the right way to get people to respect their elders, paddling them and things like that, but...
Fear of violent retribution is not respect. Those two, there's a big divide between those two.
But we have gotten into an age now, going back to band, where there was a girl who was literally on the band bus, and they made a mess, and they told her that she had to clean it up, and she was literally ticking her cell phone to call her parents to get in touch with their lawyer, to bring the lawyer involved because she didn't want to clean up the bus after she made a mess. So I think there is an issue. I will say that. I think that we need to not paddle people, but we do need to maybe do a better job of teaching kids to respect their elders.
That also starts with the parents. The fact that she thought she could call the parents to then call the lawyers shows you where the problem is stemming from at its point.
I think you always have spoiled, entitled kids. What gets me is when people we always get caught up in the moment when people go like, oh, what's going on now? Or like, oh, it's changed. Like, is it really that kids are more disrespectful now? Or is it just more that we have more access to the internet and see things, and people have always been disrespectful, but we've been more socially sheltered, and now we're like, hey, everyone, technology.
I don't know, because I'll be honest, I've seen a shift. Like when I was in high school, I could see a shift from my freshman year to my senior year, a shift in mentality and a shift in the way that people responded to authority.
But was that really there, or was that just your perspective is going one end being the freshman, another end being the senior? Like, it's
no,
always...
because it was systematic. So like even things like when I was in the band, and they call this hazing, and I don't agree with hazing, but I don't think this was hazing. It was always a thing where the seniors would get their uniforms first, and then the freshmen would get their uniforms last. And as you got older, you would move further up in the line. Well, even stuff like that is now considered hazing. There's no respect for time put in. There's no respect for...
That's not hazing.
Yeah, it's not hazing, but it was like put under that umbrella when I was in school, and they had to get rid of that system of, the seniors get to get in line first to get their food at band trips. And I didn't really think it was hazing, because as you got older, it was a respect thing for the time that you put in the organization. But even that was put under the umbrella of hazing, and they had to get rid of a lot of those policies. So I've seen the world change in just 4 years of being in high school, and I'm sure it's probably gotten worse at this point. But then again, you do have women now, certain teachers sitting on people's heads and farting. So maybe it has regressed backwards. I don't know. So, the reason why the world is going to end, I always end with this. It's because there's no love for Santa Claus. And we don't have to play the music for this. We're just going to roll in. No love for Santa Claus anymore. There was a post by a group that is, I believe it's called Memories of Century 3 Mall, and they posted a photo of poor old St. Nicholas sitting all alone on a red carpet in the middle of an abandoned mall that is not closed down yet. So if you want to see an abandoned building, and it's still being legal to enter that abandoned building, Century 3 Mall is the place to go. And it really is sad to see, because that was one of my favorite malls when I was in college. We would go there, and we would always go up to the third floor, and Cash and Culture was on the third floor. And we would go there to hang out with my friend Dee. She used to be on this program way back. If you look at the first episodes of The River's Edge, she would come on once a month. She was Dee Faust, the culture queen, and she would come and talk about nerdy topics, things like we discussed with Star Wars. And it was a lot of fun, but we would go up there and I would hang out there for hours, and I'd end up buying things from the store just because I felt guilty for wasting so much of their employees' time by just having conversations and discussions. But it was a really cool place. It was up on the third floor, and the mall was going through hard times at that point, but there were still people there. It was still a mall that was very much in action and still having things happening. And it was a really cool, unique mall. It was a beautiful space. And now, man, there's not even a single... I think the last food selling place, like food court restaurant, I guess you call it, has moved out of the mall. They don't have anything to eat in the food court at all anymore. And Cash and Culture...
food trucks roll in.
Yeah, they could. Cash and Culture has moved out. And every time you see this happening, there's a picture of it behind us if you're watching the video. It's basically, there's a little gated area. There's a Santa Claus sitting there. And outside of that, there's nothing. There's not a single kid. There's nobody walking in the mall. I will say, Santa's got a pretty sweet gig at Century 3 Mall, because minimal work, and I'm sure he's still getting paid. And to the people, the owner of the mall, to their credit, they are still pledging to keep them all going or make something happen on that site. They've never given in the towel.
When it eventually closes, it's going to be cool to see how all these malls get repurposed, whether they turn into paintball arenas or apartments or what have you. I think that's going to be pretty exciting.
I mean,
it will be.
Trying to rent Century 3 out as a set, right now.
You know what they should rent it out as? They should turn it into a conference center. Maybe for a future conference, but
2019.
Yeah, but honestly, if you think about it, that it's such a big expanse, that mall, and I think that's probably one of the problems with that mall. There was a study that was done that suggests malls like Pittsburgh Mills, for example, that have the very long hallways, that they don't do as well as malls that are more compact and have turning aisles, because apparently people are only willing to walk so far visually. Now, they'll walk the same amount of distance, but if there's a turn and they could see the end of a wall, it doesn't feel like they're walking as far, and they'll continue to go. But if
it's the same thing as like casinos too, where they always want you to go in and immediately turn because you start to disorient yourself and don't know how to get out.
That's true too, because that's another thing. If somebody could see the store and it's all the way down there, they'll just leave. But if they don't know and they have to find their way, or they see a wall, they turn, it looks like you're going shorter distances. Yeah, that's a good point. It probably does also disorient people in these malls, and then they start buying more and more things. I know Monroeville Mall can be like that at times. Westmoreland Mall is pretty easy to navigate, but it still has those small aisles. It's basically a giant X or plus, depending on what way you're looking at it. And it's easy to get to each exit, but in that mall, there is the one wing of the mall, and maybe this is why the world's going to end. I've tried to go in it. There are times, there's one wing of one of the X's, one of the edges of Westmoreland Mall, where there are times I cannot even walk in that entire quadrant of the mall, because there's a Macy's with its perfume, a Bath and Body Works, and a frickin' Yankee Candle, all on the same floor, all pumping their fumes into the atmosphere, and it's like a barrier. You try to walk in and you almost fall backwards like you're hitting a glass wall, but it's really just a wall of nasty, horrible perfume.
What about those Annie Ann's pretzel fumes, though?
Well, those are great. I like those fumes. Those fumes can go, they can go on any time. That's about it for us. Thank you so much, Aaron, for coming in. Aaron Watson. Thank you, Eric, for rejoining me. Erick
Always
Williams.
a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Let's give a plug one more time.
January 27th, the Going Deep Summit.
December 2nd, the last Koala, Fearsome Koala comedy show. Check it out. Hit me up. Undisclosed location. Be cool.
Come on out, be a rebel, and go to the Underground Comedy Show.
That's right.
And also be forward-thinking and go to the Going Deep Summit. I will be running around December 2nd. We have the Yuletide Tour right here in Millvale. We've got all sorts of great stuff. It's on the 2nd. You can shop local with the wonderful local businesses we have here in Millville. You can listen to the River's Edge or the Metal Edge, your local radio station, on the way there. Santa Claus will be leaving Century 3 Mall. He'll be abandoning the crowds of kids that are swarming him at Century 3 so he can come here to Millvale and light the Christmas tree. It's going to be a great time. We're going to have live entertainment, lots of fun. Do not miss it. The Yuletide Tour, December 2nd, all day, all throughout Millvale. You can go to riversedgepgh.com for more information. For Erick Williams, for Aaron Watson, Zach Fehl behind the board, I am Brian Crawford. Stay tuned. We've got local music up next at riversedgepgh.com, Pittsburgh's voice for local music.